Yes, we are bored. We're all bored now. But has it ever occurred to you, Wally, that the process that creates this boredom that we see in the world now may very well be a self-perpetuating, unconscious form of brainwashing created by a world totalitarian government based on money? And that all of this is much more dangerous than one thinks? And it's not just a question of individual survival, Wally, but that somebody who's bored is asleep, and somebody who's asleep will not say no?
I think it's quite on the cards that we may have drugs which will profoundly change our mental states without doing us any harm. I mean, this is the pharmacological revolution which has taken place, that we have now powerful mind-changing drugs. Physiologically speaking, are almost costless. I mean, they are not like opium or like cocaine, which do change the state of mind, but leave terrible results physiologically and morally.
Define yourself in reference to other external coordinates. You must define yourself internally with your relationship with a higher entity. Think of yourself as a manifestation of some higher thing, some higher frequency. This is the visible realization. And you know that because you can't see atoms, can you? And you certainly can't see the forces that hold atoms together. There, in the micro-quantum world, Richard, lie the answers to everything. We can't understand it with our logical, rational minds, but we feel it intuitively. Get yourself in alignment with that stuff and you beam like the sun.
Jeepers creepers.
Yeah, man.
Talk to yourself more. Affirm to yourself more. Don't move none of that. No, close this down and go within and say, I am the greatest ... ever. I have all my needs coming with speed. I am a being of love and light and knowledge. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. Whatever it is, have your affirmation on your tongue.
Using a moderate dose of psilocybin, psychiatrist Charles Grobe and his colleague Alicia Danforth shepherd each patient through a psychedelic experience they hope will calm their fear and anxiety.
When individuals develop a terminal illness, they're often overwhelmed with anxiety. They often have to take large quantities of pain-suppressing medication. It constricts their capacity to appreciate life, and it constricts their sense of who they are, their sense of who they always thought they were, and their sense of purpose, their sense of meaning.
This is not about taking psilocybin or other compounds multiple times. It's about orchestrating, if you can, a single, profound, transformative experience.
Don't eat a mushroom stem and see colors. Eat the whole bag and see God one time. A real God. Not some storybook bullshit God that's been fucking kicked into your head for the last 2,000 years that you just accept with no logic whatsoever. A fucking real God that works for you.
Psychedelic or magic mushrooms have been ingested by humans for over 9,000 years. Even today, this naturally grown fungus is commonly used as a recreational drug, causing hallucinations. But how exactly does it work? The main psychoactive ingredient in shrooms is called psilocybin. When ingested, the body breaks it down into the active drug psilocin, which makes its way to the brain. And here it begins to prevent the reuptake of the neurotransmitter serotonin, increasing its activity. On top of this, psilocin actually has a similar chemical structure to serotonin, meaning it can also bind to and stimulate receptors in the brain. This amplified stimulation causes you to perceive and experience things without any real stimulus, also known as hallucination. These can be of a varying nature, from visual to auditory sensations or mystical and insightful feelings. And while the experience can be quite enjoyable, some users have reported very unpleasant episodes. These feelings generally last between 3 to 8 hours, but could feel much longer as the drug alters your sense of
analogy that you could use to describe how the drug affects brain activity is either to say that brain activity becomes relatively disordered or disorganized in the state. Another thing that you could say is that it's not entire disorder, that rather it's more like the brain enters a more kind of anarchic state.
It's fascinating. I think one of the interesting implications of this kind of work is that we're biologically hardwired for having these kinds of experiences. It's not just unique to mystics, you know, spending years of meditation in a cave, that this is part of the human biology to have these kind of integrative experiences that can really set the stage and the platform for remarkable personal change.
A new study published in Human Brain Mapping finds that psilocybin, the active chemical in psychedelic mushrooms, is closely tied to the parts of our brains that help us dream. Now, logically, this makes sense. Psychedelic drugs are notorious for transporting users into a heightened state of consciousness, which explains why they're often used in a spiritual context. The part of our brains that gets activated during dream sleep are tied to the brain's ancient emotion system. And when someone takes psychedelic drugs, that area of the brain becomes uninhibited, so their emotions seem to get louder. What's interesting is that the ego system, the part of the brain that gives us our sense of self, actually gets quieter and more disjointed under the effects of psychedelics. So it's believed that the quieting of that ego system is what allows our emotional system to become louder. According to the author of the study, Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris, psychedelics cause ego dissolution, meaning they temporarily diminish one's sense of having a firm and enduring personality.
I don't know which one I like the most. I think I'll just upload all of them. Do I look okay? Do I look okay?
Do I look okay?
I am the #1 most impactful artist of our generation. I am Shakespeare in the flesh. Walt Disney, Nike.
At the same time, they widen the breadth of associations made throughout the brain, which is what enhances our creativity and causes that state of expanded consciousness. That also explains why they're sometimes used in psychotherapy, because they help patients facilitate an emotional release.
Got us in the rain.
I have not been a person to feel compassion for myself. I hold myself to a high standard and I judge myself pretty critically. And to have that moment of grace where I was just, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. It's all right. I can't put it in words, but I'm so grateful and touched and shocked. And it's lasted. It's lasted, so I think that it will bring more changes. To be very trite, I kept that expression, the family of man, kept on going through my mind, has been going through my mind since that day, that dosing. And I see it in a way, if people could know how connected they really are, connected to spirit and connected to each other and connected to nature, and if people would know that so much of their fear would dissipate, so much of their anxiety would dissipate, and I just hope and pray that these studies will continue and open up the field.
This is how the gods created this whole reality.
There's a fascinating organization called MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. This is a nonprofit think tank that advocates for the responsible investigation of psychedelic plants and chemicals and exploring their potential as tools for transformation, for interpersonal transformation, right? And this is a moment that we're living in now, right? We're kind of living through a psychedelic renaissance where all of a sudden people are starting to take these tools, these cognitive technologies that have been used for thousands of years a little more seriously.
The use of things that would lift us out of the egocentric situation
could therefore be considered medical, as healing for a social disorder. The ideal of a good doctor is to get rid of you as a patient. He doesn't want chronic patients, poor people always hanging on to him, always rushing for help. He wants to set you back on your own feet. And that is an excellent principle. This is where the doctor really has something to say to the priest, because priests tend, by and large, to want to hook you. In other words, to keep you coming to church, so that you will pay your dues and the church will prosper. So the more people they can get hooked on religion, the merrier. Now, priests in this way ought to learn from the doctors and try and get rid of people by telling them their gospel or whatever it is they have to say, and say, now you've had it, go away. Because you see, if you do that, you will create a vacuum, and it will always be filled. Just as when the faster a doctor can get people out of his office, they go around and tell everybody, this man cured me, I didn't have to go back to him. So more people will be coming in. There are always plenty and plenty of people, never come to an end. So in a way, the religious man ought to handle a huge turnover of people, coming through and going away, coming through and going away, then he's really working. But he should not get them hooked on the medicine.
And that is a values-changing drug. Hallucinogens are a value changer. So is marijuana. Like it or not, it changes your values. It opens up windows, doors of perception, Aldous Huxley called them. And you see things differently. And I suddenly was able to see my place and to realize I was in the wrong place. You see, in 1967, the summer of love, the peak of the hippie movement, I was 30. I was entertaining people in nightclubs who were 40. And they were at war with their kids who were 20. There was a generation war. I was in the middle of it. I was 30, 20, 40. And I said, what the fuck am I doing over here? These are the people that will at least understand me and give me a chance. I was just expanding. I was just expanding naturally. It wasn't forced. I had denied that part of myself, and finally it came into full flower, and I never became a really big success until that.
You can't just decide to give a bunch of innocent, drug-free kids some sort of psychedelic. What if it interacts badly with their Wellbutrin, their Abilify, their Adderall, their Ritalin, and their Monster Energy drink? If it weren't for acid, you might not have an iPod. And you definitely wouldn't have some of the best music in your iPod. Francis Crick discovered the structure of DNA while on acid. The Beatles made Sgt. Pepper while on acid. I made DC Cab while on acid. On and on. And it's not just anecdotal. In a study from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine last month, scientists found that a single dose of psilocybin, which is the drug in magic mushrooms, created a, quote, long-term positive personality change in most patients. People improved in the areas of sensitivity, imagination, and broad-minded tolerance of others. In pharmaceutical speak, psilocybin is known as an asshole inhibitor.
Is this real life?
In this short documentary, a 61-year-old mother of two tries psilocybin-containing mushrooms for the first time. Psilocybin-containing mushrooms grow naturally in all parts of the globe. However, they are still classified as illegal in many countries. Recently, there has been a new surge of research into the potential beneficial effects of psilocybin. These studies include, but are not limited to, help overcoming depression, addiction, and PTSD.
I'm really taking chances. This is unusual. This is forbidden. I've always had a closed mind to all this kind of thing. No thinking about it, no discussion. So this is odd for me.
So why are you doing this today?
That's a really good question. Could it help you break bad habits? You know, ideas, could it stop me from wanting to please everybody all the time? I like to get to the root of that one. I'm always trying to be a people pleaser. I just don't want to lose my sanity.
To err on the side of caution, she has decided to take a very modest dose. She will be consuming 1 gram of psilocybe cubensis. This is the smallest dose available to feel a desired effect. Considering her age and weight, this is a very safe dose for her. No one has ever died due to a psilocybin mushroom overdose. However, extremely challenging experiences have caused users to never be the same again.
Oh my.
You're in a nightmare right now?
No, I think how I've lived in my head has been a nightmare. Wow. When really this whole experience has started, seeing all the beauty everywhere. How beautiful everything is. And then I turn into this nightmare. It cuts me off. That's what it did. When you start looking at those pictures in your head, it cuts you off.
We're calling my mom right now to find out how her next day... Hello? Hi.
Who's this?
It's Adam.
Oh, hi, Adam.
You're on speakerphone right now. Explain how you felt today.
That I reconnected with my real self. That I got rid of stuff that was holding me back from being myself. Like a bunch of lies.
You got rid of a bunch of lies.
Yeah.
Okay. So overall...
I don't want to say it like that. The echoing makes it hard to think.
You feel clarity? You said something else.
My intuition came back stronger, that I had lost connection to. My intuitiveness came back.
Okay, so you felt some beneficial effects, but they happened the next day.
More so the next day. More clarity. More appreciation. Happier, lighter.
I see. So you don't regret doing it then?
No. No, not at all.
You know, the people who believe it's an actual mystical experience believe that what it may very well be is a chemical gateway, and that there is another world beside the material world that we exist in, and that there is more than one way to experience this type of transcendent consciousness experience, and that there's, you know, psychedelic mushrooms and dimethyltryptamine and peyote, and there's a bunch of different ways to somehow or another pass this rigid dimension that we exist in and experience something that's close by. And the detractors would tell you, no, you're just being delusional, you're hallucinating, these experiences are not real. That may or may not be true, but my point of view has always been whether or not you are actually going to a different dimension and experiencing intense love and beauty and complete lack of ego and an understanding of reality that wouldn't be possible without that experience. Whether or not it's a hallucination or not, it is the exact same experience. So if you are actually going to another dimension and communicating with God, or whether you think you are because you're taking this psychedelic drug, the experience is indistinguishable to you.
I mean, and even Terence McKenna's work through an anthropological lens talking about the origin of human evolution linked with psilocybin. And so there's just such a vast history that's kind of taboo to talk about, of course, because psychedelics are illegal. They're a very taboo source of dialogue in our society today.
Sometime in the last 50,000 years, before 12,000 years ago, a kind of paradise came into existence. A situation in which men and women, parents and children, people and animals, human institutions and the land, all were in dynamic balance. And not in any primitive sense at all. Language was fully developed. Poetry may have been at its climax. Dance, magic, poetics, altruism, philosophy. There's no reason to think that these things were not practiced as adroitly as we practice them today. And it was under the aegis of the boundary-dissolving influence of psilocybin. We were nomadic, We were breeders and caretakers of cattle. We worshipped a great goddess. We followed a yearly round in a vast grassland cut by crystal streams that were washing down out of the higher altitudes. And we were probably black as your hat, for that matter. And it was great. Well, if it was so great, what happened?
I don't buy the idea that, you know, the society the way it is right now, it has to be this way. Someone's always going to have to work at Burger King. Someone's always going to have to... I don't buy that. I think people are pretty fucking flexible. If you look at the broad spectrum of humans and human behavior from different cultures all over the world, it's pretty obvious to me that there's a lot of different ways that people can act. We don't have to have fast food workers. We don't have to have people who work shit jobs. We don't have to. We just need to figure out how to restructure society so everybody somehow or another plays a part, has something to contribute, has something to share. I mean, that's what a real society is supposed to be like. I give you some coconuts, you give me some fish. You know, we make a deal, and you do it back and forth and left and right. And when there's nothing to contribute, then you start looking, the president needs to give us jobs. We need jobs. So instead of something to contribute, you just find something to do with your time. And then it becomes about doing that more than it becomes about finding something to contribute. So society gets wrapped around becoming a part of a machine. Society, instead of becoming a bunch of individuals that are expressing themselves in unique ways, and everybody sort of borrows and shares and sells this and you sell that, and we all sort of figure out how we can contribute in a society, we got sidetracked and diverted into these boxes that they call companies and corporations, and we got stuck into these containers they call cubicles or offices, and we got forced into this system. So our time, instead of it being invested in making pottery or fixing cars or doing something where you have a passion or you have some sort of a connection to, instead of that, you've sold your life to sit in a box and work for a machine, an uncaring machine that demands productivity. It doesn't understand you, it doesn't want to understand you. It has a bunch of very strict things in order to keep the humor at a minimum in the office, just in case one of you fuckheads says some stupid sex jokes that gets them sued and they have to give somebody $1 million. So get it together, and this is your life now. No natural behavior. Everybody's wearing clothes they don't want to wear. Everybody's showing up and doing something they don't want to do, they have no connection to. That's the problem with our society. And then what's the reward for all this stuff? Go home, get a big TV. Go home, you're going to get a shiny belt buckle. You're going to get a nice purse. You're going to wear shoes that you couldn't afford last week. You're going to get that dream car. And every week we're chasing down this new object. And every week we're trying to fill this hole in this sad shadow of a life that we've been left with after work. That you work 8 to whatever hours a day plus commuting, and then you're like this. And that's your life. That's your real fucking life. All that other stuff is not your life anymore. All that other stuff is work. And most of us have committed to that. I know you've been there before, and I've been there before.
Do you know a lot of New Yorkers who keep talking about the fact that they want to leave but never do? And I said, oh, yes. And he said, why do you think they don't leave? I gave him different banal theories. He said, oh, I don't think it's that way at all. He said, I think that New York is the new model for the new concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they've built. They've built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they've made or to even see it as a prison. And then he went into his pocket and he took out a seed for a tree and he said, this is a pine tree. He put it in my hand and he said, escape before it's too late. Of course, the problem is where to go, because it seems quite obvious that the whole world is going in the same direction. See, I think it's quite possible that the 1960s represented the last burst of the human being before he was extinguished, and that this is the beginning of the rest of the future now, that from now on there'll simply be all these robots walking around, feeling nothing, thinking nothing, and there'll be nobody left almost to remind them that there once was a species called a human being, with feelings and thoughts, and that history and memory are right now being erased, and soon nobody will really remember that life existed on the planet.